The city of Fort Worth has been ordered by the Texas Water Control Board to clean up the mess at the Riverside Sewage Plant. To motorists traveling on the Dallas-Fort Worth Turnpike, it's odorously clear that indeed something needs to be done about the situation. The Water Control Board has ordered the installation of a chlorination process, which according to their experts is needed to prevent the raw sewage from reaching the Trinity River. The order calls for the equipment to be operational by the summer, which according to the calendar is only a couple of months away. The city of Fort Worth has been stalling the installation until their own report is completed on the matter. According to certain sanitation officials, there is some evidence that the chlorine could be harmful to the soil in this area and that it could present somewhat of a hazard in the Trinity River water.
Do you feel the federal government should step in and assist the state in caring for the great natural resources of your state?
Well, that depends on what you mean. Sometimes the federal government overprotects us, you know, and I think that the state of Alaska certainly has the capability of handling its own conservation practices. However, because 97% of the land in Alaska is owned by the federal government, I think it would be unrealistic to say that they don't have some interest in the conservation of the resource in Alaska.
Purchasing equipment to beef up the capacity of the Riverside plant to comply with the specifications of the Water Control Board. Art Sinclair reporting for Channel 8 News, Fort Worth.
The search for 4-year-old Renee Ogle has ended. The little girl has been missing since 5 p.m. yesterday when she wandered away while her parents were preparing a meal in the area. This is White Rock Creek, where the body of the little girl was brought to surface by 3 divers from the Dallas Fire Department about 10 a.m. this morning. I talked to one of the investigating officers, Lieutenant W.F. Southard, about the tragedy. Lieutenant Southard, can you describe this tragedy to me?
Yesterday afternoon, this little girl and her parents came to White Rock Creek area on a picnic, and the mother and father were in the process of preparing a meal, and they were busy, and they looked off, and the little child wandered off, and they made a missing report on her yesterday afternoon about 5 p.m. They made an intense search last night up into the wee hours of the morning. Then this morning at 8 a.m., we asked the National Guard for assistance. They give us 140 men immediately. Then they give us an additional 60 men. We had a total of 200 National Guard, and we made a complete ground search. We called in the Fire Department Rescue Unit. They had 3 divers. The divers recovered the little girl in about 10 foot of water. She was completely clothed and apparently just slipped into the water and drowned.
From the scene of the tragedy, this is Coach Eastcash for Channel 8 News.
I'm sure that geographical considerations have been used in making appointments, but there's not a clear pattern. There have been members on the court from the same state, for instance, at the same time. I think there's been a heavier concentration of appointments from eastern states, but that might be natural just in terms of the history of the country.
The history of the court is that geographical distribution has been taken into account in these appointments. I think it's wise also on the political side, since the Supreme Court is engaged in a gigantic job of reconciliation, to have geographic representation as well as philosophic or ideological.
Strict construction implies correct construction, and there isn't necessarily a correct construction of the Constitution, except what the Supreme Court might say it is.
I think a strict constructionalist, as that word is used now, would we mean a judge who was wary, cautious about extending the power of the judicial branch into areas that are not really judicial, or controversies that are not really judicial in nature.
Justice Black may be the strictest constructionist on the court. He takes a strict constructionist view of the First Amendment, that free speech means free speech, which means there cannot be any laws relating to libel. There cannot be any laws prohibiting distribution of pornographic literature, obscenities, and so forth. That's a strict constructionist view, if you might say.
The term that the lawyers use is activist, usually, as indicating those judges who seem to be ambitious to extend themselves into what might be called non-judicial areas. The court now, unfortunately, doesn't have anyone who is, or doesn't have any great number of judges who would restrain themselves. Judge Harlan is a good example. The new Chief Justice is moving in that direction.
I think it is true that this court has been an activist court with regard to civil rights, protection of minorities, and so on.
This is, of course, the devil.
Yes, you are right.
Is evil easy to draw?
Evil is very easy to draw, you know. He's smiling, he's always pointing something, yes.
What is the hardest vice to illustrate?
The hardest?
Yes, of those.
Oh, I don't know. All the vices are very amusing to draw, you know.
What is the hardest thing to illustrate?
The hardest thing, the virtues, I think, you know. That's very difficult. It is something inside. You cannot express so well what is inside. The serenity, for instance, you know, you have You are just peaceful with a smile, with the bright eyes maybe, but how to draw that with a piece of chalk on a blackboard? It is impossible. I think that a little sense of humor helps always serious things, you know. And as often as I can, I am drawing in such a way that people can recognize themselves, you see.
Texas was the largest state in the United States, and it's built on much oil money. What lessons do you think that Alaska could be learning from perhaps mistakes Texas has made in its development?
Well, I don't know what mistakes, if any, Texas has made. I certainly want to be on a friendly basis while I'm here. I think, however, that the lessons that Texas has learned over the years certainly can benefit Alaska. We are interested in the Texas Railroad Commission, which I understand regulates the oil and gas policies of the state of Texas. And in Alaska, this is a little more confined in that the Commissioner of Natural Resources, the Commissioner of the Department of Natural Resources, has the basically the same duties as the Texas Railroad Commission. So we're, believe me, taking a real good look at Texas and Alberta and other oil-producing areas that have had some experience that we haven't had in Alaska.